The following episode was recorded live from the green room of Intel's ISECCon 2021, otherwise known as Intel Security Conference.
Hello and welcome to the Cybersecurity Inside podcast. I'm your host, Tom Garrison, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Camille Morhart. Today, our special guest is Maribel Lopez, founder and principal analyst at Lopez Research, following the latest in technology trends. So maybe we can start just from a very high level and say, what are some of the trends that maybe caught you a bit by surprise or maybe a little bit bigger than you'd anticipated from when we spoke a year ago?
I think when we spoke, one of the things I was really focused on was this move to remote work and the potential for that to open up a lot of security vulnerabilities. People having older hardware that might not have been patched, a lot of phishing. Ransomware was talked about, but it wasn't sort of the thing that was going on right now. And, one of the things that's really changed is we've seen so many attacks on such a wide range of companies and really in some devastating ways, shutting down gas line, shutting down hospitals during some really, intense times. You don't want to have issues with hospitals during COVID. That was just a real negative thing. So really, I think the attack surface shifted a little bit from what I originally thought it would be, where it was an attack on individuals that would allow you into company and just really attacking companies that had older infrastructure. Now, how they found them, maybe they just stumbled upon them, but it seemed to be a much different animal in terms of much more directed than I thought it was going to be.
You're saying now it is more directed and targeted, whereas before it was more opportunistic?
I feel like there's definitely more targeting going on than there had been in the past. I also feel like people thought it was a really good opportunity, that the malicious actors really thought about it and said, hey, now is a time when there's probably a lot of different places we could find vulnerabilities. So I think they were always out there, but it seemed like the level of attacks just got amped in this particular time frame. One of the things that we're seeing is, like, if you built a strategy around it, it's like, what type of company would have to pay? How much would they be willing to pay? And the more pain that is, the more critical that infrastructure is, either in terms of supporting a bunch of people or in some cases life-threatening, right? These were things where it's like, if you can figure out what the potential vulnerabilities are there, look for them, make that type of attack, you know that your success in getting paid as a malicious actor is pretty high because it is critical infrastructure. And there was some really interesting discussions around the pipeline. For example, it's like, should you have paid? Should you have not paid? These are hard decisions, but I really felt bad for some of these executives because they were like, hey, we have to get this back up and running. So, it's one of these matters of, if you have an issue and you can't resolve the issue quickly, then you could see why they would have paid. But having seen that, I think that made it even more interesting for more people to go out and say, okay, let's try to find these type of vulnerabilities. If you attack the garden variety user and they get locked out of their machine, how much is that worth? Probably not that much. Whereas if you attack a hospital, you attack a transportation system, you attack a pipeline, there's like a whole different level of concern that happens there.
The concern element that you mentioned, I think also translates to now government interest and regulations. And you saw a bunch of interest in the US around critical infrastructure and sort of protecting it against, foreign adversaries. But you also saw some of that expanding into even things like supply chain concerns as well. So there's the direct hacking elements of it. And then there are the elements of, well, how much of my infrastructure depends on, various forms of technology, and do I need to regulate that more closely?
There's certainly been a discussion of regulation. One of the things I think is interesting is a lot of this discussion, in my opinion, there were many industries that for a lot of years underinvested in technology that are using a lot of legacy technology, and they've actually opened themselves up to this. And healthcare is a great example of this. Healthcare was very far behind in terms of modernization of IT infrastructure. And I think we're starting to see a change in that. So this was a terrible way to get there. But I think that the first stage, before we even talk about regulation, is just for every organization to try to figure out, is your IT infrastructure holding you back? And I'm not talking about in an agile digital transformation way. I'm talking about in it will shut your business down way, which there's two levels of concern here. And I think there's now a much healthier recognition of, even if we didn't want to go there because of competition, because of making more money, because of all the other things that we as analysts have certainly spoke about in the digital transformation era, now I think there's a realization that if you have old infrastructure, that infrastructure might not be supported for new software releases, patches, and the like, and you are really open to a whole world of hurt. And at this point, I feel like it's on you as an organization at this point. You can't say you don't know anymore, because there have been enough examples over the past year to say, uh-oh, I should have been looking at this. So if you're not looking at it now, there's potential legal actions that could happen out of that. And it's just irresponsible. So I think at this point, we're in a different place in terms of talking about it. We might get down to the point where there's regulation of like a minimum security standard for certain types of data and certain types of industries. That would be, to me, regulation just takes so long that you're well beyond what needs to happen by the time anything gets approved. So it's probably better to look at having people come in and do security audits to figure out where your vulnerabilities are. Think about how old certain infrastructure is. Is it 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old in some cases? This is a real problem for certain organizations. An expensive one too, I have to say.
Thanks for joining us for Cybersecurity Inside. You can find more episodes, including our companion series, What That Means with Camille, wherever you get your podcasts.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the guests and author and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Intel Corporation.